With each of these examples, we're thinking in gestures involving the whole arm and transferring the weight to the key rather than just using fingers alone. So when we come to legato, rather than starting with a 5-finger pattern, I prefer to start with 2 fingers in this exercise I call caterpillars. It's great to use a chromatic pattern, moving in and out of the black notes. Then we can extend this to 3 fingers. Again, we start with the long fingers so that the hand and arm stay in alignment. This is a wonderful exercise, especially for more advanced students who may not have had training in alignment and using the length of the key previously. Now, I'm often asked for fixes for collapsing joints, which I believe can be trained to be more stable using the exercises in this chapter on joint support. We have spyglasses and finger wrestling, and my favourite, which is called monkey pull-ups. So the monkey puts his finger on the fall of the piano and pulls himself up into the tree, making sure that each joint flexes in turn. There are also exercises to encourage the support of thumbs and 5th fingers, and the crab exercise, which helps the support of the bridge. So here we're moving down a scale using just the thumb and the 2nd finger, but keeping the C shape, and then we extend the exercise to involve the other fingers one by one, alternating with the thumb. Moving on to staccato. I think staccato is an easier movement to learn than legato, and therefore I think it's best to start young players with tunes that are detached. For this we need the basic falling exercise already established, but the notes are shorter, and this is what I call the trampoline bounce. It's an easy image to understand, especially if we begin by bouncing on the lap and then transferring this to the piano. For greater articulation, we can extend the exercise to double bounces. And then bounce across the octave. Single note staccato requires a slightly different movement, which I've called sweeping, and the exercise involves repeated notes. We still involve the whole arm, but the finger moves in the key, creating a sparkling, articulate sound. In advanced playing of fast passages which require a leggero touch, this movement is a really effective way to practice. So for a Chopin etude, I could practice like this. It becomes quite easy. Now, at every level, establishing a Cantabile sound is of paramount importance. I've found this exercise hugely helpful at all levels. We start with long notes, playing on the finger pads, keeping the hand soft and pliable, the wrist mobile, and slowly transferring controlled weight of the arm to the key. Then we move to 2 notes, going down on one and up on the next, but trying to match the tone. Then we transfer the note over more notes, transferring the weight and concentrating on listening to the quality and evenness of the tone. Probably stiffness in the wrist is the most common problem I see. So many students find it hard to engage their fingers, but to keep the wrist relaxed. So we use this circular movement in a wrist circle exercise called windmills. We start on the fall and then transfer to the key, engaging the fingers with the key, but keeping the wrist flexible. It's an exaggerated movement, but it's so useful in helping students to unlock the wrist while engaging the fingers. Now, scales. Students often practice these as a warm-up, but it's simply a waste of time from a physical point of view if the scales are played without alignment and an even tone. So I divide scales into tetrachords in an exercise I call wiggly snakes. By moving up and down each group of notes, it encourages alignment without needing to discuss the technical concepts with the student. Also, it prevents the dropping of the thumb, which often contributes to a lack of evenness. Now, moving on to rotation, many technique books talk about rotation from the forearm, which is a very natural movement. But my feeling is that the whole arm needs to be free to rotate from the shoulder in order to be part of the movement. So we begin by shaking from the shoulder like a dog trying to get dry. And then on the keyboard, I like to begin with a gesture exercise, rotating the arm but floating the hand off between each group to ensure that no tension remains. We begin with fingers 2 and 5 to keep the alignment and add the thumb after the movement is free. Then we can move on to sustained rotation. The most important concept here is that the wrist doesn't rotate and therefore shouldn't be involved in the movement. I often use the scissors technique to make sure that the wrist stays on one level and doesn't participate. We need this for broken chords, broken octaves, Alberti basses, trills. I haven't time to deal with all of these, but I'll touch on broken octaves because this is such a problematic technique, especially with small-handed students. Here it's easier to start with a smaller interval so that the student doesn't set the stretch. It's best to allow the arm rotation to take the hand over the octave rather than reaching. Now arpeggios. The biggest problem with arpeggios is that we need 2 different movements depending on the speed of the arpeggio. When the arpeggio is slow, there's time to play legato, moving the thumb under the hand and travelling smoothly like a boat passing under a bridge. For this we need a flexible thumb so that the elbow doesn't kick out, and the windscreen wiper exercise is great for establishing this. But as the tempos increase, there's not a long enough time to pass under the hand. So I use gestures, diving across without turning under the arm. It's as if the thumb rotates across the hand rather than underneath, so the whole arpeggio is felt as one gesture. Probably the most important concept in the teaching of technique at every level is release. Each note in a passage should release immediately it's played so that tension is not carried to the rest of the passage. This applies whether the note is held or not, because repetition with tension will practice in a lack of release. We need to avoid pressing. We can't change the sound once it's been played. And we need to release between chords and octaves, especially if you have a smaller hand. Widely spaced notes need to be released so that the hand keeps returning to its neutral position. Now, I've only touched on the surface of what is in Fit for Piano, but please check out our Facebook page where we have a lot of resources. Thanks once again to the Francis Clark Centre for the opportunity of sharing with you today.